groom and barn manager at DP Equestrian, Doug and Jess Payne's farm in Aiken. And today we're going to talk all about her experience getting to that spot and kind of what it takes to be in that role. So for those of you who don't know, that barn has a lot going on. So they have 5-star event horses, they have Grand Prix show jump horses, they have babies, and Courtney just told us that she has 26 horses at the farm right now. So, and that number seems like it's been that high for the duration of your time at DP Equestrian, Courtney. So there's a lot to manage there. And not only that, but Courtney has also competed up to the intermediate level of eventing herself. She started out in Pony Club riding actually at the O'Donoghue's farm in Illinois growing up. So we'll learn more about that. And then Courtney also, I thought it was very cool, has a degree in chemistry and mathematics from Hollins University. Is it Hollins University or Hollins College, Courtney? College, University.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, but I think, okay.
Hollins University.
Okay, university, got it. And then also a degree in journalism. So kind of similar to Doug, when we've chatted with him, he has an engineering degree and that's very important to him. But I thought it was very cool that Courtney has a lot of degrees under her belt as well. And I don't really have my mind around how she managed to do that and get all of the work experience under her belt to get her to where she is today. But that's why we're chatting today. So we'll learn all about that. But first and foremost, Courtney, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us tonight. I know you are very, very, very busy, so thank you.
Not a problem. Thank you guys for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's so fun. So usually we start just by breaking the ice. So let's start just by how has your week been so far? It's Tuesday night now.
It's been great. We are done showing for the spring season. We got through the last 18 weeks, I think, that have pretty much been every weekend. So I feel like everyone's taken a nice deep breath.
That's amazing. So 18 weeks, you had either an event to go to or a show jumping competition to go to, or both.
Yeah. So we left the farm January 3rd to go to Wellington, and I feel like we haven't stopped since.
Wow. Well, even more of a big thank you then to be on the tail end of that, because if I were you, if I had a free hour, I'd be like, I'm going to sleep. So 18 weeks of showing are in the past, and now how long is the break with no shows?
This week and next week. So, and then we'll go back to Tryon for 2 straight weeks I think we're taking 14 that time. So yeah, we're no downtime for long.
Yeah, totally. Well, I'm sure that it'll be a busy 2 weeks, but given your past schedule, it'll feel very nice. So I said it in the intro, but I was kind of trying to figure out how you did all of these things to get to where you are. So I read that you worked for Jan Byyny, Sam Burton, and Agatha D'Ambra, who's a show jump rider. Did you do those things? Were you working for people prior to college, during college, or after college, or kind of what was your path in terms of getting introduced to being a professional groom or even starting as a working student?
Yeah. So like you said in the intro, I was really lucky. I grew up 15 minutes from Meghan O'Donoghue's farm in Southern Illinois. And so rode with her and her parents a bunch, and they were really close with Jan, and we'd clinic with Jan and those kinds of things. And then when I went to school at Hollins, I was actually 3.5 hours from Middleburg. So I wasn't in a great position to really work with a trainer in Northern Virginia. And a friend of mine introduced me to Sam, and she was at a barn, I think an hour and 15 minutes south. They're just outside of Martinsville, Virginia, in Axton. So that was kind of my first real working student position. I went down to work for Sam between my freshman and sophomore year. And then I actually structured my fall schedule around being able to stay at the barn and work. So I moved everything where Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I had morning classes, Tuesday, Thursday, I had afternoon classes. So I would go to class Monday morning, pack up, drive down, ride all afternoon, do the barn, do my homework, get up the next morning, do the barn, rod everything, drive back to class. And I just pretty much flip-flopped my schedule. I had a really cool horse at the time. It was my first intermediate horse, a little thoroughbred named Sunny, this little chestnut fiery thing, and really hoped that I could take him to young riders. So then second semester of my sophomore year, Meghan was actually Jan's head groom at the time, and they needed some help in Aiken. So I took a semester and studied independently and shipped myself down to Aiken to work for Jan there. And then just kind of finished my first degree by myself, riding and everything kind of at home and back and forth between school and stuff like that. And then I took some time off and rode some client horses out of my own farm for a bit, did a lot of fox hunting. I actually went through the professional development program through the MFHA, which is how I met Billy Selmar. So it was really funny that we were stabled near each other at Kentucky because we didn't know each other through eventing at all. And then kind of decided I didn't want to fox hunt professionally. Got my second degree in journalism, went back to school at SIUC near home, thinking, you know, I'd write for the Chronicle or Eventing Nation, or combine that with my math background and do something along the lines of what EquiRatings is doing. So it's been really exciting to watch them kind of develop their company and how that's grown. And then I went to Florida with Meghan for winter with my next intermediate horse, a horse we call Goose. And then didn't really know what I wanted to do. Had a job offer in Chicago. They wanted to move me to Charlotte, and I was not interested in staring at four walls every day. And Agatha happened to be looking for a showgroom. It was posted on Facebook. So actually on the train ride home from there, I saw her job opportunity and went to her for a month. Found I really liked the grooming, but missed the eventing. And Doug and Jess just happened to be looking for somebody. And I had met Jess through Jan. So it was just kind of a weird way that it all connected back to one another.
That's really serendipitous. What year did you start working for Doug and Jess?
That was August of 2016.
Okay. And it sounds like by nature you, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe you're just capable of it and that's why you do it, but it sounds like by nature you kind of err toward like juggling a lot of things and being really busy. Just how you described your undergraduate experience, like that is a lot to take on. Do you enjoy that?
Yeah, I found that if I don't have kind of enough going on, then I actually get distracted. Like the more chaotic it is, the better I focus. And I think it comes from, I played sports in high school and college. I worked full time. I had my own horses. I never took a class like a study hall to get anything done. I just have always go, 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 go. And so where I loved working for Agatha for a lot of reasons, we had 6 horses and 3 grooms at a horse show. And I was like, what do I do with myself? You know, and it just wasn't stimulating.
So now that you're at Doug and Jess's farm, you're the barn manager, but how many other people are working at that farm? And are you in charge of their day-to-day activities so that everything works together the way that it should?
Yeah, so I've got 3 other girls that work, you know, exclusively with the horses. So it's great. Like 4 is kind of a really good number where everything can get done the way that I want it to get done. But then even if, you know, someone has a day off, 3 people, it's still incredibly manageable. We have a great farmhand who fixes boards, fixes gates, builds things, does odd projects for Doug, works on the trailer, that kind of stuff. I talk to him like if there's anything wrong, but him and Doug just kind of make his own plan and schedule. And then we've just hired a great guy who's really good with the horses, but he's more of like stall cleaner, fence management. He helps me do a lot of heavy lifting when we're packing and unpacking the trailer. He's just kind of like my constant, keeps everything moving throughout the day. He makes sure they have hay and water if we get busy, packing, body clipping, etc. And he's great. He can help with anything with the horses, but he doesn't like to be in the hustle and bustle of tacking and untacking and bathing and all of that.
That sounds like a great team. And that's a good segue into one of the first questions that we got from like on social media prior to this. So Kins, I'll hand that over to you to kind of jump into the questions now that we've set the stage a little bit.
Perfect. Yeah. So Courtney, to clarify, so it's you plus 3 working students, and then like some people you rotate days off. Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, so it's 2 working students, and then we have kind of like she's like our home manager. So she keeps me alive when I'm on the road, and she's like, "Hey, we need hay, grain, shavings." And her, Jess, and I kind of all communicate together to get that side of it done. And she rides very well as well. So she does a lot of the riding when we're out of town.
Awesome. So yeah, that kind of it leads us into our first question, which is how do you, as like the barn manager, the head groom, how do you manage setting the schedule? Because it looks like, at least from social media, that like in the middle of the week, you guys are at a show jump competition, and then on the weekend you're an event competition, and it's like, and then Doug is like schooling cross country. Like, how do you juggle all of that?
So I feel like we talk a lot in our group, and then, like probably 20% of it is actually relevant to what's going on during the day. But communication's the biggest thing for us. Like Doug, Jess, and I have a group chat of, very important things that like we don't need to bother the girls with type of thing. And then we also have a barn group chat that's like, okay, hey, just so everybody knows, the vet's coming to do vaccines this day, this day, this day. And then we have a Google Calendar that's color coded. And so it says when we're leaving for a horse show and where we're going to. And then I have a giant whiteboard. I think it's 3 feet by 4 feet. And that hangs right inside our barn door. And so that has a list of who's riding what those horses are doing. Everyone has a column on the board. I have like my little corner that's just stuff for me. And then I will go through and update the shows as they go and have a list of what horses are going. Because with it being such a quick turnaround, like the girls at home have to be able to, make sure manes are tidy, bridle paths, stuff's clipped up. If it needs body clipped, that they have it on the list, or it's one that they can body clip, that they do it while we're gone. So it's a huge team effort, but it starts top down, and Doug, Jess, and I communicate a lot about things, and then we kind of distribute activities and, duties from there.
One thing that I read in an article about you, I think you were interviewed, but Doug was also interviewed. He was like, Courtney is generally 2 steps ahead of the rest of us, which is why she's so like invaluable to our team, which I'm definitely like getting that sense that you are capable of being that way, but it seems like a ton to stay on top of. So you have your group chat, you use Google Calendar and the whiteboard. Are there any other apps or anything that you're using to manage everything that's happening, or do you have what you need with those tools?
I have I'm able to do it with those tools. I keep a lot of other lists, like the notes app on my phone probably has 30 tabs open on it that I don't actually need, but it'll have lists and everything else. The one thing I did put together a couple of years ago that was really helpful was we did a binder with all the horses in it and all the tack that they go in. So each individual horse has a note card, and it's like, if they flat, they go in this type of tack. If Jess is riding them, she can ride them in this saddle and stuff like that. And then it was kind of foolproof. Anyone walked into the barn, and even if the cards weren't updated every single day, you got close enough to what the horses needed that everything was safe and functional. And the girls didn't spend 45 minutes running around going, oh, I don't know what bridle this horse goes in. And then we're all running around looking for tack and trying to direct people. So yeah, we did that. I want to eventually transfer it all to a Google Doc, because then everyone can just have it on their phones and I can update it in live time and not have to go find new note cards, erase them, update them, whatever. But that's a project I haven't had time for.
Yeah, that's interesting, because that's like you setting your team up for success by having that information there and just like avoiding the chaos before it starts happening. That said, because you're overseeing people right now, and those people, there have been people before them that you've overseen, what advice do you have for people in like a working student position to make them really excel in that role?
Be a sponge. There's 1,000 different ways to do pretty much anything in the barn. And just because you were taught one way and your boss wants you to do it another doesn't make your way any less right. it just, whoever you're working for, you have to do it the way that they want it. But you're going to learn something every day, no matter who you work for. And so whether it's just watching how somebody does polo wraps or standing wraps, watching how they handle a horse that's difficult to clip, running to set fences, not walking, like show that you're enthused and ask questions, because the reason we hire working students is because we want to teach the next generation, not because we just want a body in the barn. So if you show that you want to learn and that you're really into it, you're going to get way more out of it. And the people you're working for are going to be more than willing to go out of their way to help you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And when you guys have a new working student come into your program, what are the top 3 things that you tell them on their first day where you're like, these are the most important things for you to remember forever?
Don't be offended if I accidentally snap at you, because I'm probably thinking about a million things and I'm not even upset with you at all. It's something in my own head. But no, work hard. And if you feel like you have nothing to do, go clean a stall, because I guarantee anytime you can walk down the barn aisle, there's stalls or something to clean. But like I said, just learn and observe and be motivated, and then be safe. That's my other big thing. Like, horse safety and human safety comes above everything else. I'm not worried about you cleaning tack if there's horses running outside that need to come in. That'd be a big, big thing.
When in doubt, clean a stall. Write that down, people. Okay, I'm kind of backtracking here, but I'm curious. What does a day in the life of Courtney Carson look like when you're just at the farm? So not a day that you're traveling for a show, but like even starting from like, when do you wake up and when do you get to call it a day? And like, what are those activities typically in between?
Yeah. So everyone thinks I'm crazy, but I usually either get up and work out, or I get up and I sit and I drink a cup of coffee in silence at my house before I even leave, because it's the only time of day that I get just to myself. But yeah, so I'll check my email, do those kinds of things. And then I don't live on the property anymore, which was kind of a big transition because I had lived there for the first 5 years working for Doug and Jess. It just kind of gives me, like, when I do leave, I get time away, which I think has been very healthy. But so usually we show up, we try to have as many of our horses out at night as possible. So we'll feed jump grain in all the stalls, bring in what's outside, do morning chores, turn out the ones that go out, all that. And then we kind of follow the philosophy of like, start riding early, get it done, as soon as we can, and then have the afternoon to do all the other tasks. That actually has worked really well in my experience here, versus like, you've got one girl body clipping, kind of doing nothing. And, we ride for a bit and then we take a break, and then no one's motivated to come back and ride after lunch. Like, you just kind of want to be done and do other things and put all the tack away. And then, so that for me too is like a clean as you go. We try to stagger it so that it's like all of the flat horses go first before we bring out jump saddles, or vice versa. That way you can clean tack and put it away as you're done with it. And you don't get to the end of the day and have 16 saddles and 30 bridles and 15 sets of boots out. So we'll get through Doug and Jess's list. The girls will ride in between if we have the time and enough people on the ground. Work through barn as we go. And then we try to kind of like wrap it all up with noon chores, hay, water. If anyone gets lunch, do that. And then we'll take a break. And then we use those other couple hours in the afternoon before we start evening chores to work on packing, organizing trailers, making a plan for the next day, that kind of stuff. And then we'll flip-flop turnout, do the barn, that kind of stuff, and then wrap up. And we try to be out by like 4:30 or 5 o'clock, because we do enough long days when we're clipping, packing, when riding does go longer. We go cross-country schooling. I like to try to let everyone have a bit of a life. And so if you can get done and get out of the barn, let everyone go have their evenings to themselves, because like I said, we do enough long nights that I don't want to burn anybody out.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so Are you generally the only person who goes to the events? So if you go to a show jump competition or you go to an eventing competition, are you the person who goes with the horses, or does one of the working students come too?
It depends on how many we take and where we're going. So right now I've got one working student that's only a show jumper, and then one working student that events training level. So when we go to Trine in a couple of weeks, they're actually both going to come with us, because the eventer girl, she is a college student, but she's been in school at UK all semester. So she hasn't gotten to compete all spring. We're going to get her to try and let her get her feet wet again. We can take her across the road and cross country school at Windridge, that kind of thing. And then the other girl is coming and competing her horse as well. So they will both get to come with me. We have an FEI horse, so that horse will be in a completely different barn as well, which adds a whole nother level of organizing into the schedule. So it is helpful to have both of them there. But pretty much anything 6 or under at an event and 8 or under at a jumper show, I'm probably on my own, unless someone else is competing that's going with me. Yeah.
Oh my God. That's incredible. One thing that you mentioned is like helping be proactive about preventing burnout with people who are working at the barn. And I know you've been a big advocate for how grooms are treated and like what the expectations should be there. Can you talk a little bit about that and the current state of affairs?
So I think the biggest thing is like you have to advocate for yourself. It's not that any of these riders mean to be hard, to deal with or insensitive to the fact that you need time off. But I think a little bit the industry is always like, you do it because you love the horses, and we do love the horses, but that's also why we're willing to inadvertently push ourselves past what we should do. And you work too many days in a row, too long of hours, that kind of thing. And, your bosses are trying to run a business as well. So they might not notice that that's what's happening. And so, like, honestly, for anyone that's thinking of doing this, like, you've got to just take a step back and like really look at it and say, I've got to take time for myself, and have a discussion with your bosses, like whether it's a day or a weekend, or you need another body to go to a horse show with you, like figure it out. Everyone, I think, wants to work together. But I feel like there have been a couple of bad eggs that think that all grooms are just supposed to jump up every morning and keep going no matter what, because they love these horses and, they need fed, so we're going to show up and feed them, because we would do that and sacrifice our own health to take care of them. I do think the industry is changing. Getting the International Association is a huge step forward. Lucy Caton, who's helped start that, well, she's started it. I've been helping. I did not start it, but she's done an amazing job. And it's really exciting. I had a lot of grooms come up to me at Tryon that say they want to be more involved than just being a member. They want to see this be successful, because we don't have a pipeline of young grooms coming in. And, the sports, with social media and the way that things can get portrayed, the sport's in enough danger. Like, we've got to have people that want to do this, that can advocate for it and can continue to help this sport survive.
Absolutely. It's so important. And what is really the goal of the Grooming Association? Like what is the objective of that organization?
I mean, eventually it would be, so the British Grooming Association is like a national standard for them with living wages, insurance, that kind of stuff. So the IGA is not necessarily going to follow that. It wants to give everyone kind of like a guideline and helpful tips of how to talk to your bosses, how to discuss your salary, whether it includes benefits or doesn't, or what would be a working wage that would be competitive in the industry. But it's also to work as a network across the world for FEI grooms and a sounding board, so that way, if you're having problems with a steward or a rule or an event venue itself, like not doing things right, whether it's towards the grooms, towards the riders, towards the horses, we now have a voice within the FEI that we can put together a motion and take it to the FEI ourselves. And then also to serve as a network for if you're a groom going to a championship and you've never been before, or you're going on an overseas trip and you've never been, you know, you can start picking the brains of people that are very familiar with these events so you don't show up completely underprepared. Or if you get there and you have trouble, you have someone you can go to for help and not feel like you can't ask questions.
It sounds
That's kind of our initial goal.
Yeah, I mean, when you describe it, I'm kind of like, how have people really gotten by without it? You know, like it seems so necessary. So can grooms in any discipline be part of that association, or is it discipline specific?
No, it's for any grooms in any discipline. We're trying right now to keep it to grooms at the FEI level, just because then it's not, you know, someone who works for their trainer with 3 beginner novice horses, bringing every little issue that we're not saying it's not important, but, you know, we've got to start small with targeting the FEI, and then hopefully we can get like a US branch of this eventually. So we're trying to keep it to FEI grooms that we can focus on changing things in the FEI, and then hoping that national federations kind of follow suit with that.
Wow, it's so interesting. And yeah, it's just, it seems like it's such a necessary like tool or asset to have in the equestrian community. So that's really cool. And we love that you're an advocate for that. What are some recommendations that you make to your working students, or that you do for yourself, to make sure, other than taking a day off, to make sure that you are like taking care of your mental health in those really long days, or when you're up at 4 a.m. going to a show and you're working until 11 p.m. that night? Like, what are some kind of things that you recommend people do in order to like take a step back and make sure they're okay?
Yeah. Honestly, the big thing, and this kind of sounds weird when you're talking about mental health, but make sure you're taking care of yourself physically. Like, whether you need to figure out what good snacks you like. And don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan of chocolate and some sour worms. But making sure that you're eating well so that your body stays fresh, you know, and always drinking water, whether it's wintertime, really cold, pouring down rain, 100 degrees, like drinking water is going to be the biggest thing that you can do. You know, and I know too that this is like tough to kind of think about, but you've got to, if you've got a chance somewhere in there, a little bit of exercise, whether it's like a 20-minute walk or something like that, a couple days a week, to kind of really just get your heart rate going and get your metabolism going. Because the biggest thing that I found with myself is like, I maintain such a high level of activity all the time that I have to go do something to kind of get my heart rate up and kind of re-jumpstart myself. And it almost helps reset my brain. It's like 20 minutes of just me with my music, no horses, no nothing. And it really kind of lets me just decompress and rethink about that. And maybe it's not, you know, going for a walk or for a run. Maybe it's, you know, 10 minutes of yoga or just sitting, or you find a book that you read for 10 minutes at night, but figuring out what little things will help your brain stop thinking about the barn and stop stressing about the horses and what you need to do and work and everything. And then I think the biggest thing is too, when you have a day off, don't come into the barn. Give your horse a day off. Find someone else to ride it, go do anything but come into the barn unless you absolutely have to.
This is life advice. Like, this is so important and can be applied whether you're a groom or not a groom. Kinsey and I have found this since starting Ride IQ too. Like, we kind of like, well, we signed up for a race. Neither of us like love running, but we signed up for a race so that we had this obligation to like get outside and go for a run. And it is what you described. It's like, you're not thinking about work for, or even if it's on your mind, it's not like you're on task for that duration of time. And it can really prevent the like falling off a cliff if you don't integrate those things. It's also, I have like a flashback from my first working student job. I was probably like 13. I was really young for living away, I think. But I was too shy to ask for water, and I didn't know where to get it. And I was like sneaking water from the hose. I thought I was going to die. And I just wouldn't like ask someone where I can get a water bottle. I think I was like looking in the shed to see if there was any water, but yeah. So now that, I mean, the things that I went through, because I was like a little bit shy growing up, and you just think these people are like celebrities, which they are, but they are also happy to help. So anyways, we've talked about advice for working students. I also am curious, because you've worked for a number of people and you've been the leader for a number of people. What are the qualities that you think make up, or like, yeah, what are the qualities of a great leader in that industry?
I mean, I think it's got to be someone who's willing to be fair, but is also willing to admit when they're wrong themselves. You know, like, none of us are perfect. And that's what, you know, I'll come in a couple times a week and be like, guys, I screwed up. Like, I'm really sorry. You know, I told you guys the wrong thing, or I packed the wrong things or something, you know. And honestly, like, yelling and screaming at people gets no one anywhere. And so I think it's the leaders who can, you know, even when things are going really wrong, can stay calm in that situation. And at the end of the day, like, my working students are not any less important than Doug and Jess are. And, you know, yes, there's like a hierarchy and a bit of a chain of command, but at the end of the day, everyone's health and well-being is all on the same level. And I think the people that can recognize that have the teams that stay together for a long time, and have working students that come back summer after summer and, you know, maybe want to come and stay long term. You know, I don't really like the thought of like, I don't know, like, barn family almost gets a little bit toxic, because then you end up with people that feel like they're obligated to do things, because, you know, it almost ends up cult-like. You know, it's a team. It's not necessarily a family, because I've seen families turn on one another left and right. And so I think looking at it more as a team, and we're all working together to one goal, is a lot healthier of an atmosphere in that sense.
Yeah, I think that is very valid. And I think it's a really good approach to it. I can just tell what a good manager and just like person to work with you are. And it's just admirable, and we love to hear it. So I know I don't want to pivot from the subject, because I'm really, really enjoying it, but I know we have a number of questions just on like various like grooming things that you really enjoy. So one thing I would love to hear from you is there anything you do notably different at a show jump competition versus an eventing competition, as far as like your approach to grooming?
So the events just end up being a lot more intensive, because, you know, you pre-ride a lot, and, you know, you have like the course walking and the cool out following the cross country. So at the jumper shows, it's kind of more of like, get there early in the morning, get everything done, like all the horses groomed, all the stuff organized, everything set out, because that could potentially be like bam, 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 bam. Whereas at the events, I can plan it to the minute I want to do, and exactly how long I want to spend with every horse. So the events are almost easier to organize, but the jumper shows are easier, because it's just kind of like, you know, okay, this tack goes on this horse. Like, I'll have my stack of saddle pads, but other than that, a lot of the same stuff just gets used from horse to horse. So it'll be like, take a bridle off, dunk a bit, wipe it down really quickly, hang it up in line for when the next horse that needs that tack comes through. But as far as like completely changing my approach, you've really got to be adaptable at a jumper show, because it might say that all your rings are going at 8 a.m. and then there's a trainer conflict and one ring runs 4 hours behind. But then all of a sudden the ring guys will call you and they'll go, you know, we're going to put the jumps up for these 3 horses that are ready, and then put them back down for everybody else. And so suddenly you're running around like a crazy person trying to get those 3 horses ready that you need. And it's just being able to like really be flexible and not get bent out of shape if something goes the way you don't want it to go.
I mean, yeah, that's my kind of follow-up on this is I've heard that jumper shows are like notoriously bad for time management. How do you as a groom even wrap your mind around that? Like when you go into the competition knowing that like no horse is going to go when they're actually supposed to go, how are you preparing, or are you just always ready to tack up a horse?
Pretty much the latter. Like I have a whiteboard that goes to the horse shows with me, and I'll write on it like the day, and then I'll go by ring, not just chronologically. So it'll go like, for instance, at Tryon, it'll go ring 4, and then it'll say, this horse in the 110s, this horse in the meters, this horse in the 90s, this horse in the 80s. And I know that that's the order that they're going to go in. So then I can kind of strategically plan my day there, and then I will write the estimated times that they're supposed to go. And then I'll go to the next column and I'll go Tryon Stadium and go 120s, 130s, 140s, welcome stakes. And then know that that's going to be kind of that order. And then you pretty much just have to be flexible from there. Like your first horses are probably going to go on time if they're in 8 o'clock. And then after that, you just groom them and hope they don't lay back down and have everything set out if you need it. The problem at Tryon is they all really like to sleep a lot in those stalls.
Keep them awake. Since we're talking about showing and use a trailer to get to a show, are there any things that you're doing for the horses? I mean, I'm sure there are a million things, but any things worth noting to like be really on top of their well-being for traveling, either in the trailer or right when they get to the show?
So I try really hard to send one of my working students ahead of me. Like we've gotten to where we're a number of horses now that typically I'm hauling a truck and trailer, Doug and Jess are hauling a truck and trailer, and then one of our kids is pulling the golf cart. So try to send that kid with like water buckets and a pitchfork and get them there and say, hey, if you can even have just like a couple of bags of shavings and 1 bucket of water in a stall. And then because of the number we take, we typically order hay and shavings at every horse show. And then throw a flake of hay in, because then that way when we pull in, I can just start unloading and these poor horses don't have to stand on the trailer any longer than what they've been on already. All of my horses, when we go to horse shows, go on like a half a scoop of soaked alfalfa, just because they're traveling, their guts are weird. It helps kind of keep all of that moving. It helps get more water into them than, what they would be getting without that, which I think is, completely something that you need to watch, especially in the summertime, like, and going to Tryon where, or going up north where it might be a little bit cooler because you're in the mountains. They're used to being in North Carolina where it's quite warm. And then if they go somewhere that's just a little bit cooler, they might be like, oh, I don't need to drink as much. And so really making sure that we do that. And then I always keep GastroGuard. And then my travel kit has Banamine, Ace, and Dex in it to address kind of anything that could arise while we're there, and just, knowing the horses and keeping an eye on them and getting ahead of anything that you might see. If I've got one that ships a little weird, it'll probably get GastroGuard before it even goes, there's a lot of different things you can do.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And we got a question on ulcer prevention, especially for horses that are trailering often, but I feel like you just answered that. So that was perfect. So do you have any favorite bathing products to add extra sheen?
Ooh, so adding extra sheen actually is going to come from a really good curry comb, not from bathing. I know that's kind of a cheap way to answer that question. But I probably have 8 different styles of curry combs in my barn, depending on the horses. But if we're sticking straight with bathing products, actually one of my favorite things is just like cheap 95-cent VO5 shampoo from the like Walmart or grocery store. And I prefer the little like scrubby mitts that almost look like a loofah that you've turned into a mitt. And I use that as opposed to like a sponge in a bucket or, something along those lines, or even just my hand. And I actually think bathing like twice a week if you need to bathe more than that, just use ivory soap or something pretty gentle for their skin. But that's all pretty good. And then my favorite thing to do is you can get that pink concentrated hair moisturizer. You put that in a spray bottle and fill it the rest of the way with water, and then you spray them with that when they're done. And that's going to help their coats a lot.
That's a hot tip. Can you talk to us about if you have like your 5-star horses or your Grand Prix horses, what's the curry routine on them? Is it like the day of currying that helps with the shiny coat, or is it a currying routine leading up to when they need to look their best?
Yeah, so at home, I really like just like your simple little rubber curry comb that has just the strap that goes across the back. And I kind of use that on all my horses. When I get to the horse show, because you figure you're probably doing a lot more bathing or you're able to focus more on them and they're also not getting the turnout, they're probably living in some kind of, like white sheet scrim or, it's called proper blankets, but show blankets, not their turnouts. It doesn't have to be quite so much. So I have a great mitt, and it's a full mitt, and I've got two. One is like the burlap weave mitt on one side, and then it's sheepskin on the back. So you can curry real good with the burlap, and then you can flip it and kind of brush with the mitt or flip it on your hand. You don't actually have to go like twist your arm in an exorcist type of way. And then I have another one that's a really soft rubber, and all of the little pieces on it are really thin. So it's almost kind of like a condensed version of what you would use like at the car wash. If you go through the automatic car wash and it's the big thing that like goes down your car, it's almost like a micro version of that. And my most sensitive of horses love that mitt. And it's really random. I think I found it was like a pop-up from State Line Tack or something when I was searching for something else. And it was $5 or $6. And I was like, okay, I get free shipping if I add this to my cart. Let's try it. And the horses love it. So yeah, and I'll try to curry, 10 to 15 minutes aside at a horse show, and then I use a really soft brush to like get all the dust off, and that really helps.
Awesome. And that's a perfect segue. We got a question on what are your best tips for grooming a more sensitive, opinionated horse?
Let them tell you what you can and can't do. And it might take buying 15 different brushes or curry combs and kind of figuring out what they want. And honestly, too, it might be changing their diet a little bit, because if they're a little uncomfortable or something like that, if you see it when you're brushing them, that's probably what's going on. The Van Diver horse, Quinn, as we call him, was really weird about being touched when I first started working for Doug and Jess. And over the years, we've played with his diet and done some different things. And, now you go to curry him and he like lays into you and all of that. But I really think that had a lot to do with changing his diet, more so than just him like getting used to me.
So given the number of horses that you interact with, I know that Quinn has a very special place in your heart. What made you guys bond? Like what about him made that happen, or you?
I just had a weird feeling about him. Like I was really excited when Doug got the ride on him, which was a year and change before I even came to work for them. I've seen Debbie a lot at competitions over the years. I watched the horse with Burner. Like I followed the sport at the top levels even before I was involved in it. And he's just always had this incredibly kind soul. And like, you never looked at him and was like, oh my God, that's a 5-star horse, or oh my God, that one's going to go to the Olympics. But he just always tried, no matter what you did. So then, same thing when I get into the barn and then you see him like in person and up close and not under tack. And you're like, oh my God, you really shouldn't be a 5-star horse. Like you're long enough to be the family truck, But he's just like, he does not have a bad bone in his body. And I'm also a complete sucker for a plain bay. Like that's totally my jam and my type. And he gallops, like his gallop is incredible. So I was just completely smitten with that. And then, you start spending time with him and you realize like how kind he is and how much he wants to do the job right and everything else and how hard he tries every day. And you just really want to he's totally an underdog story. And I don't know if it's because I went to a really small high school and we were kind of always the underdogs, you know, but you just really, really wanted to root for him and wanted him to be successful. So yeah.
Everyone loves a good underdog story. I think that's just universal. Yeah, Quinn is so cute. Do you have like a way that you manage a horse that has like quote unquote quirks? Like this person described their horse as liking to be a bit of a kite in hand.
Ooh, so that that would be like our quintessence horse, the show jumper. You know, it's hard because when they're a little bit flighty like that, you almost kind of want to, like, you get frustrated with them because you're like, just please come back down to earth. And honestly, it's almost being quieter with them and not trying to like force them to come back down to your level. You know, like Quincy will get really up and he'll stand up and spook at things. And I just kind of stand there and I'm like, really? Like, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? You know? And then he realizes that it's really not that fun to be that excited and that kind of manic all the time. And then to find things that work for them. So like to take him to the ring, either holding just his reins or with just a halter and a lead rope, he's not very fond of. But if I just take a chain and clip it to his bridle, he just stands there and plays with the chain the entire time that we stand ringside. And it's like his pacifier that we take with him, and it works, you know. He might still be weird going to the field, but I also try to minimize the number of things that could overstimulate him. Like if our guy is mowing around the fields with the tractor, I just don't put him outside. I'll take him and hand graze him later, or I'll wait a couple of hours to turn him out. You know, if you know that it's really, really windy at a horse show and there's a lot of stuff going on, don't leave your stall without a soundproof bonnet, because a lot of horses are way more sound sensitive than what we think. And, you know, they're flight animals. So if their hearing's really sensitive, then they're going to overreact to that. So I would think definitely like pay attention to what sounds are going on around you with a horse that's flighty.
Do you guys put soundproof bonnets on all of the horses or just the ones that you know are sensitive?
Just the ones that we know are sensitive, or like in really big situations. Like at Kentucky, you know, everything in that stadium flatted in a soundproof bonnet and show jumped in a soundproof bonnet. But when we were there for the jumper show, like only the horse in the Grand Prix jumped in the soundproof bonnet. Everything else was in normal ones.
Got it. I really like what you said about Quincy and like finding what works for him with that pacifier, or what he was using as a pacifier. Because I mean, sometimes people feel like they have to force the horse to do the thing. And somebody told me a quote like early in my career. They're like, you don't always have to slay the dragon. Sometimes you can just walk around it. And that's kind of a situation like that. Like find what works for both of you, you know? Kinsey, I think you were going to ask a question. I could obviously.
We just got a question in chat that was, do you have a favorite soundproof bonnet?
So we use the EquiFit ones, and Echo Gold's come out with their new ones that fit my smaller headed and smaller eared horses better than the EquiFit ones. And those ones don't make them all look like they have ears the size of Quinn, which is a nice factor. But yeah, those are the two that I have a lot of experience with that have worked quite well. And they all stay in place. They're all kind of like no slip as well. So you don't feel like you're going to lose a bridle with one on.
Since we were talking about Quinn a little earlier, one thing that I wanted to ask you about was the Olympics. What was that experience like for you? And is a big event like that, do you feel like that is something that you like really look forward to and want, like, of course you want to go to the Olympics again, but like, is that a highlight, or is it kind of overrated?
I mean, no, both actually. Like, you know, it's funny because everyone's always like, oh, aren't you so excited to go overseas? Aren't you excited to go to the games? And honestly, it's like, it's a pain in the ass. Like, I hate to put it that way, but all of the prep work that goes into it, you know, all the stuff you have to take, like the stress that's put on every moment and every day. And these poor horses, you drive them nuts because you figure anyone that's going to the Olympics doesn't have just one horse that they're dealing with. They've got a barn. They're seeing, you know, a lot of big jumps. So these horses are not used to being the center of attention for 5 straight weeks. And they're all sick of us. You know, we're all kind of sick of them. But it's an incredible experience because all the disciplines overlap. So you're standing there like, we got to watch all of the dressage competition. We got to watch all of the eventing as much as you could watch while working. And then we got to watch all of the individual competition for the show jumping. We shipped out before the team started. But, you know, it was kind of crazy. There was this one field that we could all graze in, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's Explosion W. And, oh, that's Geo with Charlotte Dujardin. And you're like, I'm surrounded by all these incredible horses. Then it's like, I'm holding a horse that's at the Olympics. Like, my horse is an Olympic horse, you know? And it's a little bit weird in that sense because it really does elevate them. Like, yes, you have a 5-star horse, but then you have an Olympic horse. And so it's really cool. I mean, I took probably 600 pictures, like, of anything and everything. Like, I wanted to remember every moment of it for the rest of my life. But it was a lot of stress, and I was really glad when it was over.
Yeah, I get that. And like, not only was it an Olympics, but it was an Olympics during COVID. So you had to have that fear of every day taking that COVID test and being like, oh my God, it just can't happen. So you managed it well. You made it through.
Yeah.
And now you get to compete that Olympic horse. So that's incredible.
I know. It's going to be great. So he's like my kid. I'm just really excited.
Yeah, that we're so excited to follow you guys on that journey. And that's gonna be awesome. That is a great lead into the next question, which is, do you think it's possible to be a head groom and competing yourself, like competing at the upper levels?
I think in certain programs it is. In ours, it's not. Like, you know, everyone's calling and texting and they're like, oh, we're so excited that you're going to take Quinn and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just going to do the one show on him just to kind of say I did. With as much as we travel, it's not fair to him, you know, to only get ridden when I'm home. It's not fair to the girls for me to ask them to add one more horse to their plate for then me to get to come home and just show him when I can. You know, I think in smaller programs with someone who's really good at time management and who also doesn't get rattled about a lot of things, you could easily do it. You know, have yourself set up and your boss set up and everything. But I would think, you know, if you did have people that were all riding at the same level, you would need to then have 2 or 3 people at a horse show in order to make sure that your rider had everything that they needed to be successful. I know in a lot of jumper barns, your, you know, rider will ride and you might have a groom that jumps at the Grand Prix level as well, on one horse or something. But I think that's a very unique experience, you know, definitely capable to ride at home, but as far as being able to really be competitive on the road, it would be tough.
I've actually been neglecting questions in the chat, so I apologize, people who are chatting. I've been running away with my own curiosity, but we have a question from a Facebook user, and she said, I'd love to know what Courtney's protocol is for icing legs. How often are you icing? What level of horses? Are you doing it after show jumping or cross country only, etc.?
Yeah, so this is where I'm actually quite a bit different from what a lot of people would do. And this actually goes back to more so of like my fox hunting experience. So for me and my experience, I found if you, and this is going to sound a little bit Neanderthalish, I guess, but you know, with these horses, like if you treat them like China, they're going to break like China. So we don't over ice. Like we definitely ice, and we ice when they jump, when they gallop, etc. But we are very fortunate that we've been sponsored by Horseware the entire time that I work for Doug and Jess. And between my background in sports and athletics, and then Doug being, you know, the self-proclaimed nerd that he is, and all the research that's gone into the ice vibe therapy through Horseware, you know, we pretty much exclusively use that. If I have a horse that's foot sensitive or the ground's really hard, my horses will stand in the submerged ice boots. Like when we went to the Olympics, all I took was the 9 pockets with me. And then I had buckets that Quinn stood in because we needed to ice 1 foot. But the big whirlpool boots and stuff like that, I've had more problems with horses with bad feet from their feet being too soft from standing in ice and water over and over and over again. My kind of general rule of thumb is for my girls, like in the barns, that they're not always running up. Do I ice this? Do I ice this? If it's jumping 1.20 meters show jumping or above, if it's doing 6-minute canter sets or above, or if it's going preliminary level in eventing. Those get iced no matter what after a jump school or after a gallop. And then if Doug comes in on anything else and goes, this one had a bit of a rough day, we had to jump way more jumps than what we thought we were going to have to, then we throw ice boots on it. The ice 5s are also great because you can throw them on and put a horse in a stall for 20 minutes and just set a timer and walk away. You don't have to lose a grooming bay, lose a wash rack, lose a person to sitting with them while they stand in ice boots. It's a very economical way. And when you add the vibration therapy, which increases circulation, that's actually what's doing a lot of the regenerative therapy that you're hoping the ice will do. So, it increases blood flow, which then helps the healing process as well. So that's my thoughts on it.
Yeah, those boots are amazing. I've used the ice boots on myself, and it's like, wow, the horses really get treated well. So what are things that you would prioritize with horse care if you have a limited amount of time?
Ooh, okay. So are we talking like tacking up or afterwards?
Let's say you are
I guess it doesn't
riding
really matter
in
because
your
my
lunch
answer is
hour.
the same. Okay, so if I'm showing up and riding on my lunch hour, the big thing is you got to check their legs, you got to check their feet. You've got to make sure you don't have anything stuck in shoes, that you don't have any weird swellings or weird heat, that kind of thing. And then you've got to make sure before you put any tack or equipment on that those areas are clean. If they've got like a little bit of mud stuck to their shoulder or their tail's got some shavings in it, if you're in a hurry, like you're way better to spend the time grooming the areas that are going to potentially become irritated. Your horse looks ready for a photo shoot or to trot down the center line. After you ride, if you're riding pretty quickly, the big thing would be like in the summertime to make sure your horse is cooled out enough and that their respiration's down. So you're going to be better to stop your ride a few minutes early, walk for 5 extra minutes, or go in, take your tack off, hose your horse, walk it around, make sure their respiration and pulse comes back down, which I'm not saying you have to like get your thermometer out and your stethoscope, but visual signs, make sure they're comfortable before you put them back in their stall. Or if it's in the winter time, make sure that they're either at a temperature where you could put their blankets back on and they're not sweaty underneath, or if you do have to leave them in coolers, that either you can come back and change them later, someone else could switch them for you, or that what they're dressed in would work to get them through until you're back the next day. I think temperature control is a huge part of keeping them healthy. And like I said, making sure that everything's clean under the equipment before you get on. That's going to be way more beneficial than riding for 5 extra minutes on either side.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, I have one more question here. Oh, actually, I have 2 more questions. Okay, let's start with this. What are your tips for keeping grays clean?
Keeping grays clean. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I've learned a lot about this in the last year. Actually, I didn't have a gray. So I have found that if you can keep their tails like really, really conditioned. Okay, well, the first thing is if you can keep them clipped, then that's going to be way easier to keep them clean. But if you can't keep them clipped, then that's, obviously not everyone's situation. So if you can keep them covered to some degree, whether it's a fly sheet or a blanket, depending on where you live, that kind of thing, it's much easier to wash the fly sheet than to try to lift stains out of the gray. Whatever you're doing, you've got to remember that like Quicksilver, Orvis, anything like that is all stripping the color out of their hair. So you've got to make sure that you put conditioner back in it, whether it's a like cheap conditioner from the drugstore, an actual horse conditioner shampoo that you've gotten from Cowboy Magic, Mane and Tail, whatever brand you're using, or if it's, you know, like I said, that pink hair moisturizer that you can spray back onto them. If you're, you know, looking, like a lot of people do tail bags. I have not actually gotten on the tail bag train yet, but I know people that have, and they do have beautiful gray tails. But if you're going to do that, you either want to Google like the sock method, and people do tube socks and tie them up. Like heavy duty men's tube socks. I know that works quite well. Or Will Faudrey's groom actually sews tail bags with a heavy duty sewing machine onto all the tail flaps of their blankets for Ted, his beautiful gray horse, and his tail lives in that, in everything he's in. So this is what I'm like stealing tips from Christina as I go through this life with my 2 new grays. Rubbing alcohol and mixed with a little bit of Quicksilver and a sponge is going to be a great way to lift like gray stains out of stuff if you don't have a ton of time to go bathe. A green spot remover shampoo and a good wet sponge in a bucket is going to be helpful. Or I love like a rubbing alcohol mixed with witch hazel spray that you can shake up and curry. But whatever you do, it's going to take work. It's not going to be you can rip them out of the field and go to a show and hope that you're going to get all the stains and stuff out of them. Like really good bath once or twice a week. And then, you know, add a couple of other things. Another thing you can do too is you can spray hydro into their tail or onto spots. Go ride, because that hydrogen peroxide, that's what, you know, any of us blondes know, that's what they're using to highlight your hair. So it's going to gently-ish pull the color out. And then when you come back in, you rinse it, and that's going to continue to lift all those stains out of their tails and out of their coat. But you have to remember to wash it out. Don't put it on a day you're not going to bathe.
You cut out there for a second. Were you saying put hydrogen peroxide on their coat before you go ride?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Got it. That's a great tip. That's a winner. Okay. So Courtney, we will let you go here in just a second. We are getting inundated with questions. So we're just trying to hit as many of them, but I promise we are almost done. Do you have, and this will be like our last real question is, do you have any tips for getting a horse's tail back to black if it's bleached out?
Oh, hair dye. I dye everything.
I thought that might be a quick answer.
2 boxes of hair dye, a trash bag, and a roll of vet wrap, and find a good book to read for 40 minutes.
Just listen to Max Corcoran's episode 2 and don't do what she did the first time. She used hair dye on the horse from head to toe because she thought that's what the instruction was. So just on the tail. I know, isn't that wild? Yeah, I thought that was such a funny story. Okay, I have one other question from Stephanie. How do you handle fly sheets in the North Carolina heat for horses that have bad allergies?
Ooh, so honestly, we had a student that went to NC State, and her gray horse definitely suffered from like the sweet itch. And so she looked into the proper sweet itch rugs, even though they were a little bit like, they're not your, you know, typical like netted fly sheet, but actually her horse did really, really well in that, because then even though he might have been a degree or two warmer, he wasn't as irritated from the flies and everything else. So he wasn't rubbing his hair off like crazy. We use a lot of the cool coats from Weather Beta because they're net at the bottom, but then cotton at the top, and the neck is not fully attached. Like you just attach it with the little hooks. So that allows for a bit of airflow, and then the netting allows them to stay quite cool. With that. Now, I will say in the summer, we typically turn out from like 7 to 12 and then bring in my daytime horses, and my evening turnout horses don't go out until probably 6 at night, just to try to kill those 4 hours in the middle of the day that are completely unbearable for everybody.
Got it. Thank you so
and we've
much.
had good luck too with like the amazing sheets.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no problem.
That's great to know. And yeah, we thank you so much for taking this time. Before we let you go, and then I promise we'll let you go. Can you just tell us what your favorite part about your job is?
Oh my gosh. Honestly, it's watching the horses grow up and my kids grow up. You know, like I'm probably more excited for my kids to, like my working students to win a 0.9 than, you know, I am for my horses to win an advanced class. Like, but you know, it's one of those, like, as sad as Kentucky was to like retire Quinn and everything, for little baby Carl, our rogue gray horse, to jump around the 4-star at the Kentucky Horse Park and for Quantum to do so well. Like, you know, I've raised these horses. Like I was there when we broke Carl, when we put him on the lunge line for the first time. And so, you know, it's any little thing that they do well, I get really, really excited for. And my kids too, because my kids work, you know, 60 hours a week for me, and they deserve success just as much as Doug does. So, you know, yeah, that makes me really happy.
You're such an incredible person, Courtney. And anyone, I mean, working with you, being, like you said, being on your team, like it just seems like it would be such an incredible thing. So we're incredibly lucky to have learned from you today. And I think this is our 39th episode of Office Hours, and we have never held someone hostage like this. But you're just so fun to chat with, and I hope we can do it again, because I mean, I loved every second of this. So thank you sincerely, because you have a million things going on, and we'll be cheering for every horse in your barn. We'll be cheering, of course, for you and Quinn. But we really appreciate you taking the time, and it was so fun to chat.
Oh, well, thank you guys. It was so much fun.
And thank you everyone for tuning in to Office Hours, and we'll see you next week.
Bye guys. Thank you, Courtney.